In this section, we're going to learn something new. We are learning something called quadratic inequalities. So it's very different from the linear inequalities that you learn in lower sec. And for you to understand quadratic inequalities, you need to have a good understanding about the quadratic function, or rather the quadratic function as a graph, which you should have learned it before you come to this stage. And after you learn the quadratic inequalities, we're going to marry the idea with our discriminant concept. So by now, you also have some idea of the discriminant concept. So there are the few category of discriminant condition, the condition that correspond to two roots, one root, or no roots. So we're going to be marrying all this. The discriminant concept doesn't change. We are just going to add on more components. So we are going to go through the technical part of quadratic inequality first. So quadratic inequality and quadratic equations are both different situations. So I'm going to show you the steps, and then from the steps, then we add in a bit more. And if you got any question along the way, you can ask. So if you look at the question here we got an inequality. And how do you know it's quadratic? Because you realize that there's something x squared. So there's something x squared, there's something x. So that is a quadratic. So with the inequality sign, it became a quadratic inequality. So in this situation, it is a quadratic inequality in x. So how are you going to find the range? So the range is dependent on the graph. So let's follow the steps first. So for the first step, we need to manipulate the expression. So we need to manipulate the expression so that it will be feasible to factorize. So what do we mean by manipulate the expression? So essentially, you need to move everything over. Okay, you move everything over, then you will be able to factorize from here. So the factorization is like your Sec 2 factorization. There's no change in this. So that is my first step. Okay, the second step require you to sketch the quadratic function. The sketch is not very strict. We are not going for the real kind of sketch. As in, like, I do not need the checklist. So if you still remember, in the quadratic function, I taught you about the checklist, turning point, x-intercept, y-intercept. In this case, right, we only need the shape and the x-intercept. So the sketch, we need not be so detailed. So essentially, I only need the shape to be correct, and I will need the x-intercept to be correct. So I'm going to sketch this function. So by now, you should be able to tell the shape. So if you look right, A is positive. This is the value of A. So you are sketching a smile graph. So you are sketching a smile graph. So essentially, I'm sketching this. I'm sketching this, which has already been factorized. And what do I do when I need to find the x-intercept? So we have gone through the process of sketching. So that will happen when y is equal to 0. And because you already factorize, you should be able to get two answers. So first bracket equal to 0, second bracket equal to 0. So I got the shape, I got the x-intercept. So the x-intercept here will be a -12 and 3. So this part is optional. You do not need to show this part. You don't need to show this. You can mental this in your head. I just need the x-intercept. So I need the shape, I need the x-intercept. Then the third step, I'm going to shape. So this is the part where some students will be a bit confused. So you look at the quadratic function. For this quadratic function, So what does that mean by this function? It means that, right, we are interested in the portion of the graph, portion of the sketch that is below the x-axis. So I'm interested in the portion that is below the x-axis. So this will be the shading that I'm doing. And this shading is the one that gives you the answer. So in the fourth step, how am I going to get the answer? So if you look at the shading corresponds to this number line. So this number line will be the answer. So this is the portion of the graph that is below the x-axis. So we are interested in the portion of the graph that is below x-axis. So if, let's say, we change the question, if let's say I change it, okay, what if it is this part greater than 0? So when it is greater than 0, we want the portion of the sketch that is above the x-axis. So the portion that is above the x-axis. So if you do the same thing, so not to confuse, so it should be the same sketch. But right now, I'm interested in above the x-axis. So if I'm interested in above the x-axis, I got two portions. So I got two sections that is above the x-axis. So for these two sections, right, the number line is this. So the number line is this. So if you got two sections, you will end up having two inequality because there are two separate number lines to satisfy this inequality. Okay, so typically, in a nutshell, if you shade one area, your answer is one inequality. If you shade two area, your answer is two inequality. The thing that a lot of people, a lot of you will be doing, right, will be this part. So I'm going to highlight this. So I'm going to show you the common mistake. So the common mistake for a lot of people will be this. So a lot of you can factorize. And then subsequently, you will do first bracket less than 0 or second bracket less than 0. So end up, you are getting something like this. So this is totally wrong concept. Okay, so why is it a wrong concept? So in a way, right, we will see this as two products. We want product to be negative. We want a multiplication to be negative. Something times something to be negative. So if I want something times something to be negative, I can have positive here or negative here. Or I can have a negative here and a positive here. But no way I can have both negative. Because if both are negative, like this portion here, then you are going to get a positive product. So that is one of the common thing a lot of people will do. So we actually don't entertain that. So try not to make this mistake. So when you are dealing with quadratic inequality, essentially we are looking at the sketch. We are interested in the sketch that is below the x-axis or above the x-axis. So as a big summary, in a quick summary, for quadratic inequality, we are looking at the quadratic graph, or we are looking at the quadratic sketch above the x-axis or below the x-axis. So that will be the main thing about quadratic inequality.